In 3, 2, 1, go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners work session for Thursday, April 29th, 2021, 2:04 p.m. My name is Ty Menser, Chair of the Board. We have Commissioner and Vice Chair Gary Edwards, as well as Commissioner Carolina Mejia, our County Manager, County Engineer, Assistant County Manager, and some folks from our Public Works Department. The topic today is bridge weight restrictions and informational briefing slated to last until 3 p.m. The public can follow along on our county YouTube channel or through a conference line access number at 360-252-9020. The PIN is 1234. County Manager.
Yeah, thank you, sir. What you're going to be hearing this afternoon is related to the new regulations or new criteria of the Federal Highway Administration. And the Federal Highway Administration is the one who governs as to how we manage particular bridges among other parts of the transportation system. They have provided new guidance as to how we're going to have to manage bridge weight restrictions in loading on those bridges. So while you were here today, may seem a little technical in nature, but I think it's going to be fascinating to hear the new design vehicles and restrictions and weight limits they have implemented across the nation. County Engineer.
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, County Manager. As I'm sure you're aware, bridges are a critical part of our county transportation system. In all, Public Works is responsible for the inspections, maintenance, and upkeep of 138 bridges. These bridges range in age from about 75 days to over 75 years. In fact, 17 of our bridges were built before the end of World War II, and some were built when the Model T was in production and the county population was less than 25,000 residents. Fortunately, we have a team of highly trained and highly qualified staff to make sure our bridges remain safe for the public. They receive specialized training for bridge inspections and actually get certified to be able to do these inspections. They are the ones that keep up to date on the latest standards and requirements from the federal government, as the county manager noted. In addition, this team also leads the earthquake response efforts that we have in place to perform emergency inspections of all of our bridges in the event of an earthquake. In fact, we have 5 emergency inspection kits staged at the Tilley campus with the plan to deploy inspection teams at a moment's notice. But today, we're focusing on bridge weight restrictions. And I'd like to introduce the core members of our bridge team, starting with Matt Unzelman, our county traffic engineer, Brian Meyer, our senior civil engineer, Becky Kahn, our civil engineer. In addition, not represented today is our key inspector, Sean Brandt, who's got, oh boy, years and years and years of experience inspecting every single one of our 138 bridges. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Unzelman, and I believe Becky will be running the slideshow. Matt and Becky.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, County Manager. The County Manager sounds like you might know something about this. So in this briefing today, I want to first provide an overview of what a bridge load rating is. I secondly want to discuss what some recent Federal Highway Administration load rating requirements are. I want to discuss an important bridge in our infrastructure system that's going to be needed to be weight restricted. And I also want to discuss what our next steps going forward are. So to talk about that first bullet, what is a bridge load rating? So a bridge load rating is a structural evaluation of the bridge to determine what vehicles can safely cross that bridge. Load ratings are required on all bridges in our bridge inventory system. The load ratings normally completed when the bridge is constructed, but if any condition of the bridge changes, i.e. the bridge is widened, or let's say there's some vehicle damage to the bridge, then the load rating needs to be updated to reflect what that safe capacity of the bridge is. As Commission, as the county manager stated before, these requirements are overseen by the Federal Highway Administration, and it's not voluntary whether or not we follow these requirements. It's a shall. Next slide, Becky. So the Federal Highway Administration occasionally updates the vehicles that we need to evaluate our county bridges for. And that's simply because the bridges or the vehicles that the bridges were evaluated for in the 1950s are very different from the vehicles that are reflective of, or the design vehicles that are reflective of the traffic that we see on our roads. We're seeing vehicles that are carrying heavier and heavier loads all the time. Currently in our bridge inventory, we have 2 bridges that are weight restricted. The first bridge is our Reeder Road Bridge, which comes off of Maytown Road. Fortunately, that bridge was just recently replaced, and that weight restriction will be removed when we request approval for the weight restriction on a different bridge that we're going to be discussing later. The photo that you're actually looking at on the slide is a picture of the Holmes Island Road Bridge. That bridge is restricted to single unit vehicles, which I'm going to describe in a minute. 4 or 5 axle single unit vehicles, the weight restriction is 21 ton. And if there's 6 or 7 axles, the weight restriction is 19 tons. So the new design vehicles that FHWA is requiring us to evaluate our bridges are shown here. The vehicle on the left, which the design vehicle is called an EV1 or an EV2, is reflective of a water tender truck. So anytime fire district's responding to a fire and there isn't a hydrant nearby, that's where the water is coming from. And the vehicle can either have one single axle in the back, or it can have a tandem axle in the back. The vehicle on the right is what we're calling a special hauling vehicle. So the special hauling vehicles that we had to update as part of our load rating update either had 4, 5, 6, or 7 axles. You can see in that photo, there's 5 axles, 1 in the front and 4 in the back. Next slide, Becky. Thank you. So in all, we evaluated 131 bridges. We do not need to weight restrict any of our bridges for emergency vehicles. Unfortunately, we will need to weight restrict one of our bridges for special hauling vehicles. And unfortunately, that bridge is the Yelm Highway Bridge. So the Yelm Highway Bridge is just east of the city of Lacey limits, and it's actually spans over the main line Burlington Northern Railroad tracks, right next to the Amtrak station, which is located just east of the bridge. The bridge is classified, the Yelm Highway where the bridge is classified as an arterial. It's a very popular road. More than 12,000 vehicles use this bridge every day. The bridge is 183 feet long, has 3 spans. It was built in 1951, which obviously isn't as old as some of the bridges Scott was talking about earlier, but it's not a new bridge either. The important message that we want to say today is that the bridge is not in any imminent danger of collapsing. In fact, the bridge has very minor cracking in the girders or any of the abutments. The reason the bridge, we're recommending a weight restriction for this bridge is because in 1950s, when the bridge was designed, the vehicles that it was designed for were much lighter than the vehicles that we're evaluating the bridge for today. Based upon the results of the bridge evaluation, the weight restriction for single unit vehicles with 5 to 7 axles will be restricted to 30, 33 ton, 37 ton respectively. I want to emphasize that each one of these weight restrictions is only about 1 ton less than what the design evaluation is for. So they're very close. Each one of these configurations is very close to meeting the design standards. If the Board of County Commissioners chooses not to approve the weight restriction of the bridge will need to be closed. A repair to improve the capacity of the bridge would be very difficult. And that's because, as I mentioned before, there's not significant deterioration in the bridge structure. So when there's no damage, it's hard to repair something to restore the capacity. So we're not losing any capacity on this bridge. The only way we could add capacity for this bridge would be add another intermediate substructure or pier element, which obviously with the BNSF tracks below the bridge isn't very feasible. We did complete a pre-design study to replace this bridge in 2017. And we did that pre-design study, not because of any structural deficiency of the bridge, but more because of the geometry of the bridge. The city of Lacey has a, the city of Lacey portion of Yelm Highway west of the bridge is a 5-lane section. The county section of Yelm Highway on the east side is a 3-lane section, and the bridge is a 2-lane bridge, which doesn't accommodate bicyclists or pedestrians either. The results of the pre-design study concluded that to replace this bridge, it would cost $15 million. And that's just because it's such a big bridge. It's, as I mentioned before, it's 183 feet long. Next slide. So who can still drive on this bridge? Your ordinary dump trucks are still going to be able to cross the bridge. In fact, I looked out in our yard earlier, and we don't even have a single unit vehicle that has 5, 6, or 7 axles. So none of these weight restrictions would apply to any of our county vehicles. If you've seen a picture, garbage collection services are not going to be affected. School buses are not going to be affected. Emergency vehicles are not going to be affected. And then your normal passenger vehicles will still be able to safely cross the bridge with no restriction. So what vehicles will be restricted? So as I mentioned before, it's single unit vehicles with 5 or more axles. So in the picture of the dump truck on the left, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4. If that's an SU6. So if 6 axles were engaged or in contact with the ground, that vehicle would be subject to the proposed weight restriction. And the vehicle on the right is an SU7. It's tough to see the 7th axle because it's in the air at the back of the truck. But if all 7 of those axles were in contact with the ground, it would be subject to the weight restriction as well. So next steps. So we want to reach out to public and private services, and we want to do that for a couple of reasons. One, we want to provide them as much advance notice so that they can accommodate their operations as needed. But also, while we feel that this restriction is not going to be very restrictive to other public and private services, we want to determine just how restrictive for sure it's actually going to be. Following that, we'll submit an AIS for a public hearing, and then we will be returning to the Board of County Commissioners to request to weight restrict the 012 bridge through a county ordinance. So I hope you found the presentation informative, and we'd happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Matt. Commissioner Mejia, any questions on this?
Yes, I just have a what if question. What if, when you go back for those, the public and private services, and they're saying, it's going to be a huge impact. What would be the next step with that?
So that's exactly why we're going back out to talk to these private and public services to confirm that there's not going to be a huge restriction. We definitely are not anticipating any major impact to these services. But unfortunately, if there was, because the bridge is in the National Bridge Inventory, and FWA is telling us that the bridge would need to be load rated, or excuse me, weight restricted, it would still have to be posted.
In that case, they will have to use a detour.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Edwards, anything?
Okay. Following up on Commissioner Mejia's, on that issue, if you slow the speed down, doesn't that help on that issue as far as damage to the bridge? I mean, okay, so what'd you say, Matt? It was a 1 ton difference per wheel, or what was it?
Yeah, it's 1 ton per vehicle.
Okay.
And
I mean, I know
know
people, if they're overloaded, will go over it anyway. I mean, that's just the way people are. But you don't want them to do it much, I can tell you. But what about things like having a slower speed? Would that help to prevent deterioration of the bridge?
I know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about the impact loading. What the impact loading is, when you have a heavy vehicle coming up to the bridge, when it hits that bridge, there's an additional impact.
Yeah.
And so when we're looking at actually restricting bridges, we're not looking at it. We're actually taking that impact factor out of our
Pure loading.
because we don't want to restrict we don't want to be too conservative when we're doing a weight restriction, because it does affect a lot of people. So I know exactly what you're talking, because when we do like oversized permit loads, we'll require those vehicles to actually stop before they go over the bridge to take that impact out of it.
Yeah. Okay, then the other thing is, your load is based on, if it's 2-lane, for an example, 2 heavy rigs being on it at the same time, I suppose. So, I mean, if somebody did need to get across it for whatever reason, I mean, I know how people normally work. The real world out there doesn't follow the rules. They just, they send their pilot car across and basically try to get away with it. So I don't think this is going to have any impact on anything when it comes right down to it. And I think the bridge will stay standing for quite some period of time. So I don't see that it's a big issue. So I'm ready to sign.
We appreciate that.
Okay, well, Ramiro, go ahead.
This is more of a technical question, maybe for Matt or Scott. I know this bridge was considered functionally obsolete, because what you describe is 5 lanes on one side and 3 lanes in the other. And this is a 2-lane bridge, which under the federal criteria at the old time was functionally obsolete. And as a result, it never qualified for federal funding under the broad criteria. Now with the new criteria, we're going to put load restrictions. Will that qualify under the structurally deficient category so we can access those funds?
I actually contacted WashDOT because I anticipated that question, and the answer is no. The condition of the answer that WashDOT gave me is that the condition of the bridge has not changed, i.e. it's not damaged, which is unfortunate, because in my mind, it is a detriment to the bridge.
Well, yeah, because it structurally no longer can provide free flow traffic, so you have to provide some restrictions. So it structurally becomes deficient.
Reaching to the choir.
Who can argue? Who can I argue with?
Need to go rough it up? Yeah.
Yes, sir. So thank you very much. So you will see a resolution for you to consider putting weight restrictions on the Yelm Highway Bridge.
Okay, first, appreciate the
Thank you.
further presentation, very clear. Thank you, Matt, thank you, Scott, Becky, Brian, appreciate it.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
30-minute break.